Chapter 2804. It was as if she had disappeared from the world. She was nowhere to be found. Upon hearing the black-robed cultivator's words, the Black Lotus Lord released his aura. His voice was gloomy and sinister. I want something. I've never failed to get it. Sensing the powerful aura from the Black Lotus Lord, the black-robed man thought for a moment and said, Master, there's news from the Penglai Immortal Island. They seem to have seen Fengjiu appear there. It seems. Upon hearing this, the Black Lotus Lord, who was standing with his hands behind his back, sneered. If she hadn't appeared here, it would have been believable. Now that she has been sucked into the teleportation array, do you think the person who appeared there would still be her? The black-robed cultivator lowered his head and didn't dare to speak again. He also found it strange. Fengjiu was originally in Hundred Rivers City. Then she was sucked into the teleportation array in the sky. Why would she appear on the Penglai Immortal Island? After thinking for a moment, he said, But Master, our men followed her all the way to Penglai. Could it be that the Fengjiu we caught through the teleportation array was just her clone? Upon hearing this, the Black Lotus Lord paused for a moment. Clone? Even I can't condense such a real clone. I'm sure that the Fengjiu we caught was definitely not her clone. He walked with his hands behind his back and said, The person who went to Penglai was also her. However, according to them, Fengjiu suddenly returned. She must have something on her that could teleport her quickly. His gaze landed on the sky and narrowed slightly. Just like how she disappeared in front of so many of us. As he spoke, he walked into the cave abode. As he entered the cave residence, Fengjiu, who was standing straight outside, twitched the corners of her lips under her mask. It wasn't until the first half of the night when another team came to take over their shift that their team could rest. The night was dark and there was a faint flickering light. Feng Nine, who was sitting with those men in black, was listening to their conversation and collecting useful information. After a few more days there was still no sign of Fengjiu. On this day the Black Lotus Master left after receiving a message. It was also on this day that Fengjiu began his operation. We found a few corpses in the forest to the east. A black-robed cultivator reported. Hearing this, two teams brought people over to check. But who would have thought that even after a long time, there was no movement at all? The people waiting here sensed that something was wrong and brought people to the eastern forest. Among them, the black-robed cultivator leading the group didn't go forward. Instead, he waved his hand and said, You guys, go up and take a look. The two cultivators stepped forward and walked a few meters, but nothing happened. They then turned around and said, Nothing. Before he could finish his sentence, Tunyun suddenly lunged over and snapped his neck. A blade of wind flashed past the other person's body. Soon after, blood seeped out of that person's neck. He fell to the ground, dead on the spot. Oh no. Seeing this scene, everyone couldn't help but take a few steps back. They stared at the two godly beasts that suddenly appeared. No. These two were not godly beasts. Instead, one of them was a super godly beast and the other seemed to be a mutated beast. Chapter 2805. However, no one responded to his call. There was only the sound of bodies falling to the ground. He turned around abruptly and saw a black-robed cultivator holding a dagger dripping with blood. He was reaping the lives of more than 10 black-robed cultivators who had come with him. Those cultivators with high cultivation were actually unable to resist at this moment. They stood there motionless, allowing the sharp blade to slash their throats. The smell of blood permeated the air. He suddenly regained his senses and looked at the masked figure. He exclaimed in shock, Fengjiu. You're Fengjiu. Those people didn't have the strength to resist, because a powerful pressure was suppressing each and every one of them. This was an absolute expert. Only a powerhouse who was more powerful than them could do this. Besides their master, the only other person who could do this was Fengjiu. He wanted to escape as soon as he spoke. However, as soon as he turned around, a sharp sword chi attacked him. His figure froze for a moment and he fell forward. Fengjiu stepped forward and looked at the black-robed man who was crawling on the ground. He said, Unfortunately, you found out too late. As soon as he finished speaking, Tunyun pounced forward and bit off his neck. His screams were choked in his throat. Master, let's kill them. White came to her side and said, No hurry. Let's wait a little longer. As Fengjiu spoke, she collected their spatial rings and Shenkuan bags. Half an incense stick's worth of time. After half an incense stick's worth of time, we won't have to do anything to those people. She waited here with the two beasts for half an incense stick's worth of time. After half an incense stick's worth of time, she changed into her own clothes and brought the two beasts back. When she saw the cultivators who had fallen to the ground and were screaming in pain, she curled her lips coldly. Since the Black Lotus Master dared to capture her here, he should be aware of the painful consequences. The people in front of her had lost all their spiritual energy. Their bodies felt as if millions of ants were gnawing on them. They were in so much pain that they could hardly breathe as they rolled on the ground. When they saw the red-robed Feng Jiu slowly walking over with two mythical beasts behind him, their eyes were filled with shock. Feng Jiu? Why is she still here? They had not found her for so many days and thought that she had escaped. Who would have thought that she was still here? Thinking of the problems they had encountered and seeing Feng Jiu slowly walking over, how could they not know what was going on? Feng Jiu stopped and glanced at those people. At the same time, she ordered the two contracted beasts behind her. Leave no one alive. As soon as she finished speaking, the two contracted beasts roared and pounced forward. At the same time, Feng Jiu's long sword flashed and started to harvest lives like a messenger from hell. Blood splattered, limbs scattered, and screams continued. The bloody scene made those cultivators tremble. They were not afraid of death, but they could only watch as death approached them step by step. They watched as the red figure walked towards them like a Rakshasa harvesting lives. Their hearts trembled. Chapter 28:06. A flame ignited the place. The corpses on the ground were burned to ashes together with the blood that splashed out. The raging fire soared into the sky. Black smoke filled the air and the stench was overwhelming. The fire burned for 3 days and 3 nights. Even the trees in the area and the formation were burned down. Only when there was nothing left to burn did the fire gradually die out. When the Black Lotus Lord received the news and rushed over, it was already 3 days later. When he arrived and saw the destroyed and empty place, he clenched his fists. A monstrous murderous intent shot out from his body. He looked up to the sky and roared, "Feng Jiu, even if you escape to the ends of the earth, I will find you and tear you to pieces." His voice echoed in the sky for a long time. It was so loud that even people who were far away could hear his angry and monstrous murderous voice. However, compared to the Black Lotus Lord's anger, Feng Jiu was leisurely resting on a tree by the side of the road with her eyes closed. It had been 3 days since she left that place. In these 3 days, she was sure that even if she wore a dazzling red dress and walked around, the Black Lotus Lord's men would not be able to find her. Originally, she wanted to use the Aurora teleportation scroll to leave this overseas area. However, she thought that it was rare for her to come here and that she would not have the chance to come here again. Therefore, she wanted to take this opportunity to take a look around here. Anyway, even if she used the Aurora teleportation scroll to go to her parents' place, Moze would not have arrived yet. She turned and jumped down from the tree. She called out, "Lao Bai." With a flash of light, Lao Bai jumped out of the space. He appeared in the form of a horse and stopped in front of her. He wagged his tail and looked at her fawningly, "Master." Feng Jiu turned and jumped up. Then she patted his head and said, "Let's go." "Okay." Lao Bai replied and led her forward. He was extremely fast. When he ran, it was as if he was sprinting. Only dust could be seen on the road. There was no sign of the white horse or the red dress. In the evening, when the man and the horse arrived at the coastal area, Lao Bai couldn't help but stop when he saw the blue light floating in the sea. He exclaimed, "Master, look, what is that blue thing?" Feng Jiu jumped down and stood by the sea to watch. Lao Bai ran forward and stepped on the water to play. When its hooves stepped into the water, the palm-sized object emitting a blue light shrank and swam into the depths of the water. "Master, these things are from Dong. Can they be eaten?" Lao Bai asked as he quickly stepped on a palm-sized object that was emitting a blue light. He then used his hoof to kick it to the side. Feng Jiu looked at it and said, "This thing can't be eaten. It's poisonous." "Poisonous?" Lao Bai stepped in the water and quickly retreated instinctively. Feng Jiu looked at him and said, "This is a kind of underwater creature. When it opens, it looks like a flower and emits a blue fluorescent light. Therefore, it is called the blue fluorescent flower. It has a gallbladder in its body. The blue fluorescent light is emitted from the gallbladder. If it is used as medicine, it can be refined into a medicine that slows down the body." Chapter 28:07. "Master, are you planning to catch some?" Lao Bai asked as he looked at the glowing blue flowers in the water. Because he had entered the water, those flowers had already moved away. There were no longer any blue fluorescent flowers where he was. "I'm planning to catch some and extract their gallbladders to refine pills." As Feng Jiu spoke, she walked around and set up an array. Then, she took out a silver net from her space and prepared to use this net to catch those blue fluorescent flowers. Lao Bai stood at the side and watched. He did not understand why she had to set up an array. Seeing that her master was taking care of things, he asked, "Master, what should I do?" "Go and pick up some branches. I'll need them later." As Fengjiu spoke, she pointed in one direction and said, "Walk out from there and enter from there." "Master, why do you have to set up an array?" Lao Bai asked as he walked. "Because I don't want anyone to disturb me. Outside the array, people outside cannot see this array." As Fengjiu spoke, she took the net to the other side. She stretched out her hand and spread the silver net. Then she retracted it and saw that the silver net caught many blue fluorescent flowers. Lao Bai did not ask any more questions. Instead, he did as she said and went back and forth to pick up many branches. He saw his master sitting at the side with a small table in front of her. On the table there was a jade basin that could be used to add things. It walked forward to take a look and saw that there were already many gallbladders that had been picked out and were emitting a blue fluorescent light. Since it could not do anything else, it just lay on the side and waited. As the sun went down, the night gradually darkened. It saw a luminous pearl placed in front of its master's small table. The gentle and bright light was like a full moon in the sky, illuminating the surrounding vision. Fengjiu was busy from night to day. It was not until the next morning that she took out all the gallbladders of the blue fluorescent flowers and filled 2 small basins. After tidying up the things, she took out other things. These gallbladders were poisonous. Before they could be used as medicine, the toxins had to be removed and the useful things extracted. Once she started refining the pills, she entered a state of concentration. It was as if she would not be tired or hungry. Lao Bai didn't dare to disturb her. He just walked around in his spare time until she finished her work. 2 days later, Fengjiu, who was refining pills by the coast, was controlling the pill furnace. When she saw the blue smoke rising from the pill furnace, she hurriedly retreated and used her sleeves to disperse the blue smoke. When the pills were formed, she extinguished the flame and took out the pills. She saw 3 pills glowing with a blue luster lying quietly in the furnace. She took out the pills and looked at them. She chuckled, "I wonder who will be the pill tester for these 3 pills? Master, will you die if you eat it?" Lao Bai came over and asked. "I won't die, but I don't know what will happen." She smiled and took out a bottle to store the 3 pills. Then she put away the medicinal powder. She stretched her waist and took out a spirit fruit to eat, saying, "We've been here for a few days, but we haven't seen their town yet. Let's go. Let's go to the city and get something to eat before heading back." Chapter 28:08. Fengjiu smiled and removed the surrounding array. She leaped onto Lao Bai's back and rode the horse forward. Along the coastal road, the wind blew with the salty smell of the sea. She rode Lao Bai forward. After a while, she saw a small village near the sea. "It's getting late. I don't know how far we are from the city. Since there's a small mountain village, let's rest here." Anyway, the itinerary was not tight. She had not had a good rest in the past few days. She might as well rest in this inconspicuous mountain village before continuing. "Master, there might not be anything good to eat here," Lao Bai said. He was more concerned about food. "How could there not be anything good in a place near the sea?" Fengjiu smiled and said, "You, on the other hand, can't speak when we reach the front. Otherwise you'll scare people." "Got it," Lao Bai replied and led her forward. When they reached the small mountain village, Fengjiu dismounted from the horse and walked forward. Lao Bai followed behind her. When she entered the small mountain village, she found that there were only a dozen or so families. At the door of these dozen or so families, there were a few families with children playing. There were also a few old people sitting at the door. When those people saw her, they all looked her up and down. Some of them even hid in their houses with their children and closed the door. Seeing this, she walked forward and stopped in front of an old man who was carrying a child. She smiled and said, "Old man, I'm just passing by. Can I stay here for the night?" "Immortal wants to stay here?" Of course. The old man stood up nervously. He thought for a while and said, "But I'm afraid we don't have anything good to entertain Immortal here." He had never seen such a dazzling and beautiful woman in red before. However, he knew that only the high and mighty immortals could have such charm. Entertain immortals was something that the people of this small village did not dare to imagine. They had never thought that one day, such an immortal would come here. "It's okay. I'm very casual," Fengjiu said with a smile. She looked at the skinny child in the old man's arms who was blinking and looking at her curiously. She took out a few fruits from her space. "Here." She handed them to the child. However, the child did not dare to take them and looked at the old man. This won't do. The bright red fruit was fresh and glistening, exuding a sweet fragrance. People who saw it couldn't help but swallow their saliva, but they didn't dare to take it. "It's alright, it's just a few fruits. Take them," Fungio said with a smile as he stuffed the fruits into the old man's hands. Trembling, the old man thanked Fungio profusely as he invited him into the house. "Old White, you stay here." Fungio pointed to the side, telling him not to run around. Senior White nodded and didn't speak. He just did as his master said and lay down at the side to rest. The old man brought Fungio to the back of the house and said, "Immortal, there is an empty room here. Immortal, can you take a look and see if you can stay here?" He was a little nervous because his house was rather shabby, and he felt out of place with this beautiful red-clothed immortal. "Sure, as long as we can rest," Fungio said and asked, "Elder, are there only 2 of you in the family? Why do I feel like this place is filled with old people and children? Where are the young people in the village?" Chapter 2809. The city lord wants to build a palace and captured many able-bodied men. Even the children's parents were captured and haven't returned for a year. I don't know if they're dead or alive. Upon hearing this, Fungio did not ask any more questions. He only comforted the old man, "Don't be too sad. I think your son and daughter-in-law will definitely return safely." "Thank you for your kind words, Immortal," the old man said and said to Fungio, "Immortal, please sit for a while. I'll go and prepare some food." When Fungio came in, he saw that the old man did not have anything to eat, so he said, "There's no need. I'll go to the sea to get some food." The old man was shocked and hurriedly said, "You can't do that, Immortal. There are sea monsters in the sea that eat people." "It's okay," Fungio said and walked out. He called Lao Bai and went to the seaside. When the other old men saw him leave, they walked over and asked, "Is the Immortal leaving?" "No, the Immortal said that he's going to the sea to get some food," the old man said worriedly. "There are sea monsters in the sea that eat people." "That's right. Why would the Immortal dare to go to the sea? It's too dangerous. Is there no food in your house?" "I still have some. Ask the Immortal to come back. In case there's an accident," another old man said. "That's right. I have some too. I'll go and get it for you." Yes, I have some too." The old men held the children in their hands and said. They all expressed that they were willing to take out their food for the Immortal who came to stay here. Seeing this, the old man thought for a moment and said, "Then let's go and persuade him." Hence, the old men of the dozen or so families followed behind him and shouted, "Master, they're following us." Lao Bai looked back and saw that the old men of the small village had all come. He could not help but be surprised. Fungio heard the voices behind him and stopped. He turned back and saw that the old men had all come. He asked, "Old men, what are you doing?" "Immortal, there are sea monsters in the sea. You can't go, you can't go." An old man held the hand of a child and said, his eyes filled with fear, Last time, people from other places took a boat into the sea. I saw it. The boat capsized and the sea monsters ate the people on the boat. Immortal, we have some food over there. If we take it out, it should be enough for you to eat your fill." Another old man said, "The sea is too dangerous. We usually don't dare to go there and we can't go there." Hearing the old people's words and seeing them walking over with their children, some of them not even wearing shoes, she felt warmth in her heart. She smiled and said, "It's okay really. I'm an immortal, I'm not afraid of sea monsters." 2. Are fishing fish. What do you usually eat? We grow some sweet potatoes and wild vegetables behind our houses. That's what we usually eat. Occasionally we go into the forest to chop some firewood and sell it in the city in exchange for some rice or other food. An old man said. Fungio nodded. Okay, I understand. She looked at them and asked with a smile, "Do you want to come with me? Just watch from the seaside. Later you can help bring some things back." Chapter 28:10. All right. Fungio smiled and led them to the seaside. The simple folk customs and kind hearts made this place look so beautiful. Although these people were just ordinary people, their kindness was something that many people could not compare to. When they arrived at the seaside, Fungio asked them to stand on the shore and not get too close. He also asked Lao Bai to stand guard at the side. Only then did he gather his chi and rush to the surface of the sea. The blue waves sparkled and rippled. Her red dress fluttered on the surface of the water. The dazzling flowers on her dress were like blooming flowers. It was so beautiful and enchanting that the old people and children on the shore could not help but be stunned. The tip of her foot lightly tapped on the surface of the water, creating circles of ripples. She looked into the water and saw some fishes and prawns swimming in the water. Thus, she condensed spiritual energy in her palm and sent it into the water. Bang, bang, bang. The wind from her palm hit the surface of the water, causing countless splashes. The fishes and prawns in the water were splashed up and jumped in the air. With a flick of her sleeve, the fishes and prawns flew to the shore, towards the old people and children who were stunned. Fish, and prawns. So many fishes and prawns. The old people stammered, their old eyes wide open. Their faces were filled with surprise and excitement. Quickly pack them up, quickly pack them up. I forgot to bring something to pack them up. I'll go back and get it. An old man shouted and hurried back. Quickly, go back home and bring some basins and buckets to pack them up. Quickly. Some of the old people rushed back home to get things to pack them up, while some let the older children run back. It was the first time that the children had seen so many fishes and prawns. They could not help but run back home happily. These are just small things. There will be more later. Lao Bai raised his head proudly and looked at them as he spoke. This unexpected horse opened its mouth, scaring the old man standing beside Lao Bai into retreating. He pointed at Lao Bai and said, It spoke. Lao Bai glanced at them and said, Of course I can speak. I am a mutated divine beast, but my master told me not to speak so as not to scare you. When the old people heard its words, they thought of that immortal. This was the immortal's mount, so it shouldn't hurt them. Thinking of this, they gradually relaxed and collected the fishes and prawns that were scattered on the shore. Not long after, the fish and prawns on the shore were piled up into two piles, one for fish and the other for prawns. Seeing this, the elderly and children giggled happily. Perhaps Fengjiu's movements had attracted the attention of some ferocious beasts in the depths of the sea. Suddenly, a whirlpool appeared on the surface of the sea. The whirlpool grew bigger and bigger, sucking the surrounding water into the bottom of the sea. The sound of the surging sea water attracted the attention of the elders on the shore. Immortal, come back quickly. That's a sea monster. An old man shouted. His originally joyous face turned pale with fear. Hearing that, Fengjiu raised her eyebrows and looked at the huge shadow that was rolling the waves in the depths of the water. It was a shadow that was more than 10 meters long, and its figure was very huge. She saw that in the water, the tail of the shadow was swaying, and the water was surging. Chapter 28:11. The elderly and children were so shocked that their hearts almost jumped out of their chests. However, in the next moment, they could not help but widen their eyes in shock. They saw that the immortal in red stepped on the sea monster's head and waved his hand. A cold light shot out and instantly cut the sea monster into two halves. With a scream, blood dyed the sea red and gradually faded away. Lao Bai, Fengjiu called out. Coming. White replied. Then his silhouette flashed forward. A ray of light flashed, and he transformed from a horse into a white dragon. Then he plunged into the sea and threw the huge sea monster to the shore. Dragon? The elderly widened their eyes in shock. They did not expect that the talking horse was actually a white dragon. Bang! The huge body of the sea monster was thrown up and landed in front of the elderly. They were so scared that they all retreated. Fengjiu returned to the shore and looked at the food he caught. He said, These things should be enough to eat for a while. He smiled and said to the elderly, Put these things back. I'll take these two big guys back. Lao Bai said and ran back to the village with a piece of the sea monster's tail. In fact, this was a sea monster. Other than its huge body and 2 rows of sharp teeth, it did not look scary. However, this was a ferocious beast that had become a spirit. Naturally, it was not something that these ordinary people could deal with. The elderly came to their senses and hurriedly took the things back. As the sky gradually darkened, a large pile of food was placed in front of the house of the elderly Fengjiu. Today we'll cook some for you to eat. You can share the rest. These fish and prawns can be dried or roasted and eaten slowly. Fengjiu said and walked to the sea monster that had been cut in two and cut it into more than 10 pieces. This is the meat of a ferocious beast from the bottom of the sea. Its meat has spiritual energy. Ordinary people can eat it and strengthen their bodies. Here are more than 10 pieces. Each family can take a piece back and eat slowly. Fengjiu gestured for them to go forward and take back the cut ferocious beast meat. However, the crowd stood and did not dare to go forward. Immortal, these are all caught by you. How can you give them to us? I can't eat so much. Besides, I often eat these things. You can take them. Fengjiu said with a smile. He said, How about this? Find me a big pot. I'll cook tonight's meal. Hearing this, the crowd hurriedly found a big pot and began to help prepare the fish and prawns. The elders of more than a dozen families took out their own tables and put them together. Some were big, some were small, some were high and some were low. It looked very strange, but it made everyone excited and expectant. The crowd divided the work. Some cooked the rice, some picked the wild vegetables, and some set the bowls and chopsticks. Even the children sat obediently and did not run around to cause trouble. On the stove made of simple stones there were big pots. One was boiling fish soup, one was steaming fish, and one was frying prawns. The simple dishes were all done by Fengjiu alone. The elderly helped him by putting the dishes on plates and placing them on the table. Chapter 28:12. That night, the elderly and the children ate to their heart's content. They did not expect such a noble immortal to be able to make such delicious dishes. That night everyone was full. They had not eaten so full in a long time. Especially after eating, they could take the food back home and eat it slowly in the future. During the meal, Fengjiu chatted with them. She knew that all the young people in the village had been captured by the city lord to do manual labor, leaving only the elderly to guard the small village. As the night deepened, Fengjiu went back to rest. Lao Bai rested outside the house until the next morning. "You don't have to send me off." Fengjiu looked at the elderly who had sent her off for a long time and said, "Go back, all of you." "Immortal, take care," the elderly said and waved at her. Fengjiu smiled and jumped onto Lao Bai's back. She followed the path the elderly pointed out to the city. At noon, Fengjiu came to the city gate. When she saw the people lining up to enter the city and the city guards inspecting them, her eyes flashed and her eyebrows raised slightly. She saw that when the city guards were inspecting the people entering the city, their hands touched some women's bodies. They were inspecting them, but in fact they were taking advantage of them. Some of the women had their heads lowered, and some had their faces flushed red. They were all angry but did not dare to speak. Some of the young people behind seemed to be used to this scene. They just watched and did not say anything. However, when the person entering the city was a female cultivator, the city guards did not dare to be presumptuous. They just looked at her and let her pass. It seemed that there was some difference in treatment. She was wearing a dazzling red dress and riding a white horse. She was very conspicuous among these people. Before she could get close, the city guards and some cultivators were already sizing her up. She did not care and did not get off her horse. Instead, she rode her horse through the city gate from the other side. The city guards did not dare to stop her. They did not even dare to ask her to get off her horse. She rode her horse into the city leisurely. Someone ran behind her to report to the city lord. After all, the red-robed female cultivator was simply too beautiful. Her beauty was enough to topple a city. Such a beauty must have come from somewhere else. Naturally, he had to report this to the city lord. "Miss, are you alone?" Several cultivators came before Lao Bai and blocked Fengjiu's path. Sitting on Lao Bai's back, Fengjiu looked down at the cultivators and asked, "So what if I'm alone?" "Haha, if Miss is alone you can come with us. We brothers are all rogue cultivators. If you accompany us, Miss shouldn't have to worry about any danger." A man said, his small eyes sizing up Fengjiu's body. In his eyes, a trace of amazement flashed past, so fast that no one could detect it. "I'm used to being alone. It's more convenient to be alone," Fengjiu said as he let Lao Bai continue walking. When they saw this, one of the cultivators laughed evilly. "Miss, don't you know that the people in this city are all lecherous and hungry? With Miss's appearance and figure, if you don't have anyone to accompany you, I'm afraid it won't be so easy for you to leave the city." Chapter 28:13. "Hey Mississippi," one of them stretched out his hand to pull Fengjiu who was sitting on the horse, but he didn't expect that Senior White would turn around and raise his hoof to kick backwards. The speed and strength of the kick were so fast that the cultivator couldn't dodge in time and was directly kicked away and fell to the ground. He spat out a mouthful of blood, causing the cultivator's face to turn pale. He glared at Lao Bai, who sneered and roared angrily after a long while, "What are you still standing there for? Kill this white horse for me." The other cultivators recovered from their shock and immediately drew their swords to attack. However, before they could do anything, a group of city guards surrounded them and shouted at them. "Fighting and causing trouble on the streets. On the orders of the city lord, arrest all of you." The leader of the city guards shouted and waved his hand to order the surrounding city guards to arrest all of them. The cultivators wanted to run when they saw the situation wasn't good, but they were quickly captured and pressed to the ground. "Take them away." The leader of the city guards shouted and indicated for the cultivators to be brought back first. Then, he looked at the beautiful woman in red who was sitting on the white horse like a dazzling sun. When he saw her, a trace of amazement flashed through his eyes. She was indeed an extremely beautiful female cultivator. No wonder the city lord ordered them to immediately bring her back after receiving the news. He gathered his thoughts and stared at the woman in red. "Miss, please come with us." Fengjiu's lips curled up slightly, revealing a faint smile. "Lead the way." Hearing this, the city guards were slightly surprised. They originally thought they would have to use force, but they didn't expect the woman in red to be so tactful. Well, it was better to be tactful to avoid suffering. Thus, some people led the way while others followed behind to prevent the female cultivator in red from escaping. They escorted and protected her to the city lord's estate. Fengjiu leisurely rode her horse and looked at the scenery of the city. When they were about to reach the city lord's estate, she asked, "I heard the city lord of this place is building a palace?" Hearing this, the leader of the city guards couldn't help but glance at her. "That's right. May I know where the palace is being built?" she asked as her gaze fell on the city lord's estate. "It's inside the city lord manor. Miss, you'll be able to see it once you enter." As the guard spoke, he led Fengjiu through the main entrance. When they arrived at the side entrance, he walked in first. "Miss, please." Fengjiu raised his eyebrows. "I didn't expect the city lord's hospitality to be like this. Are you going to let me in through the side door? How impolite of you." The main entrance is usually only opened for people of high status. Normally, the main entrance is not opened. The city guard said. "Really?" Fengjiu sat on Lao Bai's back and said carelessly, "I will only go through the main entrance. You can go in and report to your city lord that I will wait outside." The city guard captain was a little hesitant. He glanced at Fengjiu and ordered the city guards behind him, "Take care of this young lady." As he spoke, he signaled with his eyes and quickly went inside. When the city lord heard the city guard's report, he was slightly surprised. "There's such a thing?" "Yes, that young lady is outside and doesn't want to come in. She said she won't go through the side door and wants to go through the main entrance." The city guard lowered his head and said. Chapter 28:14. When he came outside and saw the dazzling woman in red sitting on the white horse, he narrowed his eyes and carefully sized her up. The woman's face was slightly tilted and he couldn't see her face, but the curves of her body were extremely alluring. Especially the red clothes on the white horse, they were even more dazzling. Perhaps sensing his gaze, the woman turned around and looked down at him from her horse. When he saw the woman's face, even though he had seen many beauties, he couldn't help but take a deep breath, his heart thumping wildly. He only felt that the woman in red in front of him was as beautiful as a fairy. Fengjiu looked at the person in front of her and saw that it was a middle-aged man, dressed in brocade clothes, with a slightly fat belly. His slender eyes had a turbid color, and he was currently looking at her. She frowned slightly. This kind of person was the city lord here? Miss, please come in." He waved his hand and signaled for people to open the door. Fengjiu rode the white horse into the city lord's manor. She didn't dismount and just looked around. Once she entered, she saw a place that was under construction. It was just a preliminary model and it was slightly taller than the ones here. Seeing Fengjiu's gaze fall on the palace under construction, the city lord smiled. "Miss, are you interested in that place? Why don't I take Miss to have a look?" As he spoke, he walked over and said, "That place is the palace that this house is currently building. I plan to move in and live there in the future after it's finished." As he spoke, he looked at Fengjiu and asked with a smile, "I still don't know Mrs. name?" Fengjiu glanced at him and said, "City Lord How can call me Ghost Doctor." The city lord was startled. "Ghost Doctor?" Just as he was about to ask why she was called Ghost Doctor, he saw the white horse quicken its pace. As they got closer, Fengjiu saw that in front of the place, there were some men in tattered clothes carrying things. Those people were all men between 20 to 40 and 50 years old. She didn't know if it was because they didn't have enough to eat or something, but they all looked very thin and weak. A woman walked out and gave water to a man to drink. When she saw the city lord and her here, she quickly lowered her head and left. Ghost Doctor, this place isn't finished yet. Actually, there's nothing to see here. Why don't we go to the front hall and sit? I'll have someone prepare some food and wine to entertain you." City Lord Hao said and made a gesture to Fengjiu. Fengjiu dismounted from her horse and said to Lao Bai, "Just stay here and don't run around." Lao Bai exhaled 2 puffs of air from his nose. He stood to the side without moving as he watched his master leave with City Lord Hao. After they were far away, Lao Bai glanced at the people who were working, then walked in and walked around. When a horse suddenly appeared, those people couldn't help but look at each other in dismay. One after another they avoided it, not daring to touch it. People. And the people. It was fine if it didn't speak. Once it spoke, it gave those people a fright. However, after some people heard it, they mustered up their courage and stepped forward. "You, how can you speak?" "I'm a spirit beast. Of course I can speak." Lao Bai glanced at that person and asked again, "Are there any people from the fishing village here?" Chapter 28:15. Is it that Lin Hai, the small village with only a dozen families? A thin man asked hesitantly. Lao Bai nodded. "That's right, it's that small village." The thin man asked anxiously, "How do you know about that village? Are the people in the village doing well?" "We just came from there." Lao Bai wagged his tail and said, "My master and I stayed there for a night. We even treated the villagers to a big meal. There were only the elderly and children in the village. They said that their son and daughter-in-law were caught by the city lord. Did you see them?" When the man heard this, his eyes couldn't help but turn red. With a choked voice he asked, "That's my family. My home is there. More than a dozen strong men from our village were captured. We haven't been back for more than a year. We haven't seen our parents and children for more than a year. Are they okay?" Lao Bai thought for a moment and said, "Not very well. They have nothing to eat, only wild vegetables and sweet potatoes. They are very thin and their children are also very thin. They look malnourished." Hearing Lao Bai's words, some of the men who gradually came over could not help but cry. They squatted on the ground and covered their faces with their hands as they sobbed. Those were their parents. Those were their children. They were not by the side of the elderly and children. How could the elderly and children survive with only them? Seeing those men squatting on the ground and crying, Lao Bai felt embarrassed. Lao Bai was a little embarrassed. Would they not cry if he did not say those words? He stomped his hooves in annoyance and wagged his tail. "Don't cry. They're actually doing well. When we left them with a lot of food. Now that they have something to eat, they won't starve." Upon hearing this, many people gathered around Lao Bai and asked him questions. They wanted to know more about their loved ones. On the other side, the city lord brought Fengjiu to a side hall and ordered a few dishes and a pot of wine. He looked at Fengjiu and asked with a smile, "May I know where the ghost doctor is from? Where are you going?" "I'm just passing by, so I thought I'd come in to take a rest." Fengjiu paused and turned to look at him, "But I didn't expect to be stopped by those cultivators as soon as I entered the city. Then I was invited here by the city lord." Hearing this, the city lord smiled embarrassedly. "Don't worry, ghost doctor. You can have a good rest here. You are absolutely safe here. No one will dare to touch you." Hearing this, Fengjiu smiled inexplicably. How could one be safe in a wolf's den? "Ghost doctor, let's drink. This wine is my collection from many years ago." He lifted the wine jug and personally poured a cup for Fengjiu before pouring a cup for himself. Then he gestured, "I'll drink first as a toast." Fengjiu picked up the wine cup and downed it in one gulp. She then picked up the wine cup in front of her. However, when she brought the wine to her lips, she couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. She put down the wine she was about to drink. The city lord who had been observing her saw her put down the wine cup and asked, "Ghost doctor, what's wrong? Could it be that the wine is not to your taste?" Fengjiu's lips curled slightly. She said with a faint smile, "It is indeed not to my taste when it is mixed with ecstasy powder." Chapter 28:16. Seeing the absolute beauty sitting in front of him playing with the wine cup, the city lord's eyes flashed and his face suddenly sank. He slammed his hand on the table and with a loud bang, he also stood up. He looked at Fengjiu and asked in a deep voice, "Could it be that the ghost doctor doesn't want to give this house some face? So you won't even drink this wine and say that this wine is mixed with some ecstasy?" Fengjiu raised his eyebrows and leisurely said, "So what if that's the case? Could it be that the city lord wants to make a move against me? Entering my place, could it be that the ghost doctor thinks that you can still walk out?" He gave a cold snort and narrowed his turbid eyes as he stared at her. Fengjiu gave a soft laugh. "Does the city lord think that the two words ghost doctor are just words? Do you know what these two words represent?" She stood up and her clear eyes narrowed as a cold light flashed. "You want to have ideas about me? You're not qualified." As soon as the voice came out, a strong pressure came out. That pressure that was above his was like a mountain pressing down on him, causing him to kneel down with a plop. The sound of his knees hitting the ground rang out. In an instant, the city lord's face turned pale and cold sweat poured out of his forehead. He looked at the red-clothed woman in front of him with a face as cold as ice. How could there be any desire in his eyes? There was only fear and panic. His knees were trembling. That sudden attack that caused him to kneel down had caused his knees to bear all the force. It was so painful that his tears almost fell. What made him want to faint was that the ghost doctor's strength and pressure in front of him. Why was she so strong? Damn it. How could there be a strong person in this world who would purposely hide their strength? In this world, there were people who wished that they could show their strength to the world. How could there be someone like her, clearly having heaven-defying strength but hiding it? City Lord, what are you kneeling for? Fengjiu's voice was neither fast nor slow, but it scared the City Lord so much that he didn't dare to raise his head. I have eyes but failed to see. I have offended you, please forgive me. He stuttered, his voice trembling. He felt that the pressure on his body had not moved away, making it difficult for him to speak. What do you think would happen if the City Lord was replaced? Fengjiu asked. Sir, I'm sure there are many people in the city who want to pull you down. If one of the clans in the city is supported, they will probably do better than you. Don't you think so? Fengjiu asked with a smile. He opened his mouth but no words came out. With her strength, if she killed him and promoted the patriarch of a clan to become the City Lord, that clan would probably be overjoyed. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but become anxious. Honored one. Ghost Doctor. I'll definitely change. It's too late. As she spoke, she flicked her sleeve and the kneeling City Lord fainted and fell to the ground. Seeing this, Fengjiu calmly retracted his gaze and called out, Men. The city guards outside heard the call and came in to take a look. When they saw their City Lord on the ground, their faces changed. City Lord. What happened to the City Lord? Chapter 28:17. When the city guard saw this, he couldn't help but be slightly surprised. Why was the City Lord drunk? Why was this lady still here? She was not leaving but wanted to stay? What are you waiting for? Fengjiu frowned and glanced at him coldly. Yes. That city guard responded, and together with another person beside him, helped the City Lord up and sent him to the backyard. Fengjiu walked out and called for Lao Bai with his divine sense. Then one man and one horse walked out of the gate and went to the main street. She went to a tea house and ordered a pot of tea and some snacks. When the waiter was about to leave, she called out to him, Waiter, I want to ask about something. The waiter was stunned and asked, What do you want to ask about? Fengjiu took out 2 gold coins and put them on the table. I want to know how many families there are in this city. Among these clans, which one had the best family traditions? Tell me what I want to know and these gold coins are yours. The waiter couldn't help but be delighted when he heard this. This was something that everyone in the city knew, so it wasn't a secret. Thus, he roughly told Fengjiu about the various clans in the city. The Hong family has the best culture. However, the old master of the Hong family suddenly fell ill last month and could not move. Because of this, the other families want to take this opportunity to squeeze the Hong family out of the ranks of the big families. If the Hong family did not have the support of the Hong family, they would have been pushed aside by the other families and become a third-rate family. Hearing this, she gestured for him to leave. When the waiter saw this, he stepped forward and took the 2 gold coins. After thanking the waiter, he left. She sat in the tea house for a while, drank a cup of tea and ate a few pieces of refreshments before leaving. She went to other places and inquired, and the information she obtained was the same as what the waiter had said. Once she entered, she brought Lao Bai with her to the Hong clan. Killing the City Lord directly would only cause chaos. The best way to solve the problem once and for all was to find someone who could bear the burden. The Hong family was undoubtedly the best choice. When Fengjiu arrived at the door of the Hong family, the guards at the door saw her and asked, Who are you looking for? I'm looking for your master, Fengjiu said. Seeing that the 2 guards were looking at her seriously, they did not dare to look at her impudently even though they were stunned by her beauty. How should I address you? Why are you looking for our master? The guards asked. They had to know the reason before they could go in and report. After all, it was not some unknown person who could meet their master just because she wanted to. Hearing this, Fengjiu smiled and said, I heard that the old master of the Hong family fell ill? I'm skilled in medicine, so I came to take a look. Hearing this, the 2 guards looked at each other and said to wait a moment. One of them quickly walked inside and went in to pass on the message. In the Hong residence, Master Hong was leading a few doctors into his father's courtyard when he heard the housekeeper walking quickly and whispering in his ear. A woman? Master Hong frowned slightly. Even if a woman knows medicine, how good can she be? Let her leave. Chapter 28:18. The steward didn't chase her away immediately after hearing his words. Instead, he hesitated for a moment and said, Master, that lady doesn't look like an ordinary person. Her aura, is extremely extraordinary. She's different from the people I usually see. He was the steward of the residence and had seen many people. Just now, when the guard came to report, he went to take a look before coming in to report. The lady outside the door didn't look very old, but her face was as beautiful as a fairy. Her red dress was as dazzling as the sun. Especially her aura, it was unforgettable. With his eyes that had seen countless people, that lady was definitely not an ordinary person. Hearing the steward's words, Master Hong paused for a moment. Then invite her to the hall. I'll be there in a moment. Yes. The steward responded and walked out. Fengjiu was invited into the residence. She sat in the hall and drank tea. After waiting for about half an hour, she saw a middle-aged man walk in with his hands behind his back. She sized him up and saw that he was dressed in brocade clothes and had his hands clasped behind his back. His imposing aura was very intimidating. Seeing that the butler was following behind him, Fengjiu knew that this person should be the patriarch of the Hong clan. May I know where you're from? Do you have a pharmacist badge? Master Hong walked in and asked. After seeing this lady, he finally knew why the steward said that she was extraordinary. Her aura was indeed extraordinary. Hearing this, Fengjiu's lips curled up slightly. She took a sip of tea and put down the teacup in her hand. I'm just a passerby. Why does Master Hong care where I'm from? Master Hong only needs to know that I can cure your father. When Patriarch Hong heard this, he was a little surprised. Just as he was about to say something, he saw the woman in front of him take out a pharmacist's badge and an alchemist's badge from her sleeves and put them on her chest. When he saw the ranks of the two badges, he couldn't help but widen his eyes. This, did he see wrongly? May I know if this qualifies? Fengjiu asked. Master Hong took a deep breath and became respectful. He looked at the lady in red in front of him and asked, May I know your name? Ghost Doctor. As soon as Fengjiu finished speaking, Patriarch Hong widened his eyes in shock and disbelief. Ghost Dr. Fengjiu? Are you that Ghost Dr. Fengjiu? Hearing this, Fengjiu raised his eyebrows. Patriarch Hong knows about this? How come she didn't know that the people here knew about her? I know. Patriarch Hong was pleasantly surprised and shocked at the same time. He said repeatedly, I didn't know it was the Ghost Doctor. Truly lacking in manners. If there is any disrespect, I hope the Ghost Doctor will not take offense. As he spoke, his face was full of smiles. I've been to the upper continents and heard of the Ghost Doctor's great name, but I've never been able to meet you. Fengjiu nodded. I see. I was thinking that if the doctors here couldn't cure my father, I would bring my father there to seek treatment from the Ghost Doctor. I didn't expect to meet the Ghost Doctor here. It's really my Hong family's fortune. Seeing this, Fengjiu smiled and said, Since that's the case, I'll tell you the reason why I'm here today. So that Master Hong can be mentally prepared. Chapter 28:19. That's only one of the reasons, there's another reason, Fengjiu said looking at him. I want to help your Hong clan to become the city lord of this city. Hearing this, Patriarch Hong was shocked. This? I'm afraid it doesn't sound right. If my Hong clan becomes the city lord, I'm afraid that the other clans in the city will be the first to oppose it. Moreover, in terms of strength, my Hong clan isn't the strongest. That's why I cured your father. Fengjiu said looking at him, if your father recovers and his strength increases, do you think that with his support, we will still be afraid of the other clans? Hearing this, Patriarch Hong hesitated, looking at Fengjiu, asking, I want to know, why did the Ghost Doctor do this? She was just a passerby. Why would she help the Hong clan to become the city lord and give them such a chance? Others didn't know, but he had heard of the Ghost Doctor's abilities and knew that she could do it. There's no other reason. Firstly, the city lord offended me. Secondly, when I passed by a small fishing village, there were only old people and children left. Their daughters-in-law were captured and brought to the city lord's mansion to work as coolies, so I wanted to help. Her voice paused and said, The most important thing is that the city lord is immoral and unworthy of being the city lord. She didn't intend to find trouble with the city lord when she entered the city, but who knew that he would lead her to the city lord manor, and even wanted to make a move on her. Since that was the case, then don't blame her for being impolite. Hearing this, Patriarch Hong knew the reason. He thought for a while and said, Then I'll ask the Ghost Doctor to treat my father. He cupped his hands and bowed deeply to her. Fengjiu stood up. Lead the way. Ghost Doctor, this way please. He personally led the way, bringing her to the backyard to his father's courtyard, and pushed open the door to enter the room. Fengjiu came to the bedside, looking at the skinny old man lying on the bed, and asked, How long has this situation been going on? It's been more than a month and he hasn't been able to eat for more than a month. We can only feed him liquid food, but my father isn't unconscious. He's conscious but he can't wake up or move, Patriarch Hong said from the side. Hearing this, Fengjiu went forward to check his pulse and carefully checked his body and said, "It's caused by the reverse flow of blood, but it's not a big problem. As long as the blood is blocked, it will be fine." As she spoke, she took out the silver needles. Patriarch Hong Master, who was at the side, was overjoyed. Seeing her take out the needles, he didn't disturb her and only stood quietly. He stood to the side and watched her. Feng Jiu pierced his acupoints with silver needles and used her spiritual power as a supplement to dredge his blocked qi and blood. This problem was not difficult for her, but for many doctors, even if they knew the illness, they would not know where to start. As time passed, she pulled out the silver needles and took out a bottle of nutrient solution and handed it to Patriarch Hong. "Feed this to your father. It's a spiritual liquid, it can nourish his internal organs and have a restorative effect." Patriarch Hong took it and asked, "Ghost doctor, my father, when will he wake up?" "Tomorrow morning," Feng Jiu said. Hearing this, Patriarch Hong was overjoyed and quickly thanked her. "Thank you, Ghost Doctor, thank you. Alright, I'll leave first. When he wakes up tomorrow, you can come to the City Lord Manor to find me." Chapter 28:20. I live over there," she said. Seeing Family Head Hong's worried expression, she smiled. "I forgot to say that City Lord is still lying down, drunk from drinking. I don't know when he will wake up." Hearing this, Family Head Hong smiled. "That's good. When my father wakes up tomorrow, I will go to the City Lord's mansion to find the Ghost Doctor." Saying this, he personally sent her out. Once Fengjiu left, Family Head Hong was preparing to go back when he saw his wife walking out. "Master." Madame Hong called out and came to him. "That lady left?" "I just sent her out," Family Head Hong said with a smile. There was an unconcealable expression on his face. The joy on his face made Madame Hong slightly surprised. "Master, what is that lady's background?" "Her? She has a great background. Our Hong family is really lucky this time." He laughed loudly and said, "I will tell you in detail tonight. Let's go, now we will go see father." The Ghost Doctor left a bottle of spirit liquid for father to drink. The two talked as they walked, their figures gradually fading away. Fengjiu, who left the Hong residence, returned to the City Lord's mansion. She seemed to treat this place as her home, entering and leaving freely. However, when she just entered the City Lord's mansion, she saw a beautiful woman in gorgeous clothes and two young men in front of her. Behind them, there were a few city guards. "Capture this vixen, beat her to death," the beautiful woman shouted, pointing at Fengjiu and scolding. "You vixen, you dare to come back after leaving? If I don't beat you to death today, you won't even know where this place is." When the two men saw the beautiful Fengjiu in red, their eyes couldn't help but be stunned. The two pulled the beautiful woman and said, Mother, leave her to us. We will definitely teach her a lesson." Hearing this, the beautiful woman was furious, her body trembling. "She bewitched your father, he is still lying in bed. This vixen, Before the beautiful woman could finish her words, she fell down, her body twitching on the ground, but she couldn't say a word. "Mother." When the two men saw this, they cried out in alarm and hurriedly helped her up. However, they saw that she was trembling all over. Her body was also twitching as if she couldn't control it. "What did you do? What did you do to my mother?" The two men shouted angrily and glared at the city guards behind them. "Why aren't you taking her down yet?" However, just as those city guards were about to step forward, they felt a powerful pressure suppressing them, making it difficult for them to even move. When the two men saw this, their eyes were filled with shock. Who are you? If you don't want to die, then scram back to your own courtyard. If I see you in front of me again, then don't blame me for being rude," Fengjiu said coldly and walked inside. Watching her walk inside, the two men couldn't help but swallow their saliva. How dare she still stay here? Who is this person? How could they dare to stay after treating them like this? Chapter 28:21. When Fengjiu arrived at the guest room in the courtyard and was resting, she heard a commotion outside. "Demoness, come out. Come out." Fengjiu frowned and then she stood up and walked out. As soon as she opened the door, she saw Senior White glaring at those people in the courtyard. Moreover, there were many cultivators in and outside the courtyard. Based on their ages and cultivations, she knew that these people were probably the main pillars of the city governor's estate. "Demoness, Get out of the city lord's mansion. Otherwise I'll teach you a lesson. The city lord's son shouted. However, when he saw Fengjiu looking at him, he couldn't help but be shocked and ran to the back to hide. Among them, when a few elders saw Fengjiu, their eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. Such a woman, regardless of appearance or bearing, was extremely outstanding. Looking at her, she really didn't look like a demoness. Therefore, after a few elders looked at each other, they signaled for the crowd to quiet down. One of them walked forward and asked, "Miss, why are you staying in the city lord's mansion and not leaving?" Fengjiu walked to the stone table and sat down. When she heard this, she smiled slightly. "It's not that I don't want to leave, but your city lord invited me to stay." Hearing this, the elder asked again, "Our city lord is unconscious. Does this have something to do with you?" "That's right." Fengjiu nodded in agreement. Hearing her admit it so easily, everyone was stunned. "Miss, why are you doing this?" Fengjiu's lips curled up slightly and her gaze swept past them. "This city lord is yours. I think you should know his character better than I do, right?" When she said this, everyone's expression changed slightly. Of course they knew what kind of person the city lord was, but humph. Why waste your breath on her? This kind of woman, let me kill her first. A cultivator walked forward and flashed the blade in his hand. He raised his chi and stabbed towards Fengjiu. Fengjiu just sat there and lightly tapped the table with one hand. A trace of cold light flashed in her clear eyes. She called out unhurriedly, "Lao Bai." As soon as she finished speaking, Lao Bai, who was waiting at the side, neighed and said, "I've been waiting for a long time." It suddenly pounced forward and dodged that person's attack. With a kick of its hooves, it kicked that person out of the courtyard. When they saw that the white horse suddenly spoke, everyone was shocked. Before they could recover from their shock, that cultivator had already been kicked out of the courtyard and fell to the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood. That person's expression was slightly unsightly. He was actually defeated in front of so many people. If this were to spread out, wouldn't he become a joke? What a beast. See if I don't kill you. The cultivator got up and brandished the sword in his hand to attack again. I? No, I'm your ancestor. Lao Bai snorted lightly and nimbly dodged that person's attack. At the same time he also launched an attack. He closed in step by step, leaving that cultivator with nowhere to run. In the end, that cultivator fell to the side in a sorry state and rolled and crawled backward. He looked at Lao Bai in horror. "Don't come over. Don't come over." "This is a mutated beast?" an elder said with a serious expression. He stared at Lao Bai for a while and said, "I'm afraid it's a mutated beast at the divine beast level." Chapter 28-22. Sacred Beast? Everyone's hearts trembled. This horse was a sacred beast? Then this lady in red. For a moment, many people started to hesitate. From the moment they had arrived here, this girl had not been afraid at all. She did not even make a move. This horse was a sacred beast. They were afraid that the owner of this horse was not weak either. However, the other party's power must have been concealed by her. Otherwise, there was no reason why they could not see her true power. "Miss, what do you want to do?" The old man looked at Fengjiu and asked, not daring to make a move. "Remove your city lord and find someone to replace him." Fengjiu directly stated her plan. Looking at their slightly changed expressions, she smiled lightly. "You can object, but your objection is invalid. Miss, you are meddling too much. No matter how strong you are, do you think that you can defeat all of us here?" Hearing that, Fengjiu smiled lightly. "No, I am giving you a way out." She looked at them and said, "Just based on the fact that your city lord dared to capture me, the other party drugged me and had thoughts of offending me, it is not too much to destroy your entire city lord's palace." The old man and the others' expressions changed slightly. They did not speak, only frowning as they looked at her. The few guest chamberlains behind her couldn't help but jump out. "What an arrogant woman. We want to see what kind of ability you have. How dare you say such words? You want my master to make a move? You are not qualified." Lao Bai said, snorted and prepared to step forward. "Lao Bai, stay at the side." As Feng Nine spoke, she stood up and flicked her red clothes, saying, "All right, I'll show you what I'm capable of." As soon as she finished speaking, her red figure flashed, and she rushed toward them as fast as a ghost. The few guests only saw the red figure flash before their eyes. Just as they were about to make a move, one of them screamed, then fell to the ground, twitching. Before the first person could scream, another screamed. The continuous screams and the few people who fell to the ground caused the surrounding people to take a step back in shock. They looked at the red figure who had retreated back to the stone table and sat down, their eyes filled with obvious fear. The few people on the ground were still screaming. At this time their robes were drenched in sweat. Some of them were rapidly aging and some of them were becoming skinny. Their spiritual auras were destroyed, and their cultivations disappeared in an instant. They fell from a high and mighty expert to the ground, and became weaker than an ordinary person. Several powerful guests had their cultivation crippled in an instant. Moreover, they didn't even manage to touch a corner of her clothes. One could imagine how powerful the other party was. Seeing this scene, the few old men took a deep breath. At this moment, they finally believed that this woman in red had the ability to destroy the city lord's mansion. After much consideration, the few old men discussed for a while, then waved their hands at the frightened cultivators behind them. "You all can leave first." Yes. Those people who couldn't wait to leave quickly took the few people on the ground and quickly retreated outside. After they left, the elders asked, "May I ask, who do you want to be the lord of this city?" Chapter 28-23. When they heard that it was family head Hong, the elders were slightly surprised, but they heaved a sigh of relief. They were aware of the Hong family's style. It had to be said that if there was really no other way, this Hong family head was indeed a good choice. "What do you want us to do?" they asked. Fengjiu smiled and said, "Push him to the top, of course." "We understand." They then said, "We need to prepare for this matter. We will go and arrange it now." After saying that, he bowed and was about to leave, but when he turned around he heard Fengjiu's voice again. "Wait." They turned back and looked at the woman in red, asking, "Do you have any other instructions?" Fengjiu stood up and said, "Let the people who built the palace go back. At the same time, give them their wages for how long they have worked here." They did not expect her to notice the ordinary people over there and say this. They were stunned for a moment, then said, "Yes, we will go and arrange it now." Strangely enough, they thought that such a powerful person would not pay attention to those ordinary people. After all, to cultivators, those ordinary people were insignificant. Even if they knew that some people existed, they would never ask about them. After they left, Fengjiu told Lao Bai to guard the courtyard and went to rest in his room. With the help of the elders, the matter was quickly settled. When the people who were caught learned that they could go home and get their wages, they all began to cry. When they left the city lord's mansion, they all knelt down and kowtowed to the city lord's mansion. They knew that the owner of the white horse must have saved them. The talking horse said that its owner would save them and let them go home. Now they could really go home. When they thought that they could go home, all of them ignored their dirty and messy clothes and rushed out of the city under the cover of the night before the city gates were closed. They hurried back to their homes in the dark of the night. Because of Fengjiu, the Hong family paid attention to the movements in the city lord's mansion. When they learned about the movements of the ordinary people in front of the city lord's mansion, they could not help but admire Fengjiu's methods. She could live in the city lord's mansion without fear and let the people who were caught leave safely. Obviously, she had made the people in the city lord's mansion bow their heads and submit to her. For a woman to be able to do this with such lightning speed, one had to know that other than her unfathomable strength, she also had to have lightning speed and fierce methods. "Master, I asked someone to boil some soup. Drink a bowl first." Madame Hong brought the soup to the study and placed it in front of him. "Madam, did you ask someone to guard my father?" Family head Hong asked. "Yes, how are his guarding there? He asked me why you gathered the people in the mansion to discuss something." "Is there something important?" "So I told him about it," Madame Hong said. Hearing this, Patriarch Hong nodded. "That's good too. I originally wanted to wait until the matter was settled before talking about it, but it seems like it's fine to talk about it now." He smiled and picked up the bowl of soup to drink. Chapter 28-24. Haha, they won't. Patriarch Hong smiled and said, "From the news I just received, the people in the city lord's manor should have already bowed to the ghost doctor. I think the other aristocratic families should have more or less received the news. After all, the people who were caught by the city lord have already been released." In the Hong manor, Patriarch Hong and his wife were talking about this in the study. The other aristocratic families also received some news as Patriarch Hong had guessed. Did something happen in the city lord's manor? Why did they say that the people who were caught by the city lord have already been released this evening? An old man asked. A middle-aged man said, "I've already sent people to find out. They should be back soon." As he said that, a man walked in quickly. "Patriarch, I've already found out the news." "Speak." The middle-aged man gestured. Early this morning, a woman in red riding a white horse was brought into the city lord's manor. It said that the city lord is now unconscious. The city lord's wife was tampered with because she offended the woman in red and can't speak. A few of the guests in the city lord's manor have been disabled. Now, those few elders and some of the managers in the city lord's manor have already bowed to the woman. The people in the hall were surprised. Bowed to the woman? To a woman? Yes. That man nodded and said, "It said that they want to elect a new person to be the city lord." The commoners who left in the evening seem to have been let out because of the woman in red. They were even given their wages. Hearing this, the people in the hall were moved. Elect a new person to be the city lord? Once the castellan falls, only those elders in the castellan's mansion have the ability to be castellan. However, those elders are too old, I'm afraid. The man who was reporting had a strange expression. "Patriarch, I've received news that the city lord isn't chosen in the city lord's manor. I heard that the woman in red even went to the Hong clan today." Hearing this, shock appeared on their faces. Hong clan? Could it be that they want to push the Hong clan up? Now that the Hong family's old master Hong has collapsed due to illness, and the strength of that person from the Hong family isn't the strongest among the few family heads, how can he become the city lord of this city? If she has the support of a few elders from the city lord's mansion, then it's not impossible. However, where did this red-clothed woman come from? He actually has such great ability to make the people in the city lord's mansion bow down to him? The old man at the side pondered. He was a little surprised. I can't find out anything about that. Currently, only a few elders in the city lord's mansion and the Hong clan have come into contact with that red-clothed lady. Hearing this, the few people in the hall looked at each other. The elder who was deep in thought said, "Family head, why don't we pay a visit to the Hong clan tomorrow morning and ask around?" "All right." The middle-aged man nodded. The other aristocratic families were also discussing this matter. One of the patriarchs of one of the aristocratic families proposed to pay a visit to the city lord's mansion tomorrow morning to see the situation, but he was stopped by an old man. "If we go to the city lord's mansion now, we probably won't even be able to enter the main door. Now that the city lord's mansion is not peaceful, they probably won't receive guests. It's better to go to the Hong clan," the old man said in a low voice. After thinking about it again and again, he felt that it was better to go to the Hong clan first to ask about the situation. Chapter 28-25. Compared to the other aristocratic families, the members of the Hong clan were filled with laughter in the early morning. They were overjoyed because their great master, who had been in a coma for a long time, had finally woken up. He could already raise his hands slightly. Compared to the time when he was in a coma and unable to move, this was great news for the Hong clan. In the old Master Hong's courtyard, "Father, that's how it is. Now that you've woken up, I'll make some preparations to go to the city lord's manor to look for the ghost doctor," Patriarch Hong said with a smile as he looked at his father who was lying on the bed. "Okay, go ahead. This is a rare opportunity for our Hong clan. It's also the good karma that we've accumulated. Otherwise, such a good thing wouldn't have happened to our Hong clan." Although old Master Hong had woken up, his voice was still very weak. But even so, his words were very clear. "Yes, I know." Patriarch Hong instructed his men to take good care of the old master. Then he got up and left the courtyard. After returning to the main courtyard to make some preparations, he brought a few people out and went to the city lord mansion. Not long after he left, the other aristocratic families also came to the Hong clan at the same time. When the few patriarchs met in front of the door, they all smiled tacitly. "You're early, everyone." "Haha, Brother Chin is early too. Looks like we're all the same." As they chatted, they saw that everyone had arrived and entered together. However, when they sat in the hall for a while and waited for Patriarch Hong to arrive, they saw that it was an elder of the Hong clan. "Patriarchs, I'm really sorry." The great elder of the Hong clan smiled and cupped his hands. "You've come at the wrong time. My patriarch left early in the morning. He'll probably be back later." Hearing this, their expressions changed slightly. They asked, "Where did Patriarch Hong go? When will he be back?" Patriarch went to the city lord mansion. He only said that he'll be back later, but he didn't say when. The great elder of the Hong clan smiled and said, "If you have nothing to do in the mansion, you can wait here. If you have something to do, you can find another time to come back." They looked at each other and said, "Since that's the case, let's wait here." "All right, please have a seat. I'll have the servants bring some pastries over." He nodded slightly and walked out. While he was gone, several people in the hall began to discuss among themselves. He went to the city lord's mansion early in the morning. I think he went to see that red-clothed woman. Yes, that should be the case. If he went to see her, he should be back by noon at the latest. Since you're here, just sit here and wait. That way I won't have to make another trip. While they were talking, the elder outside walked back in. He sat at the bottom left, drinking tea and chatting with them. After all, even though the patriarch wasn't here, he still had to entertain the guests and couldn't be rude. On the other side, Patriarch Hong, who had arrived at the city lord's mansion, was invited in. As soon as he was invited in, another patriarch who saw him enter also wanted to enter, but unexpectedly he was stopped outside and was unable to enter. Even that person from the Hong clan went in. Why can't our patriarch go in? A middle-aged man said unhappily. Patriarch Hong is an important guest who has been ordered by the higher-ups to be invited in. As for the others, they are not allowed to enter the city lord's mansion. The city guard said in a deep voice. He didn't let them in but asked them to leave quickly. Chapter 28-26. In the Hong family, everyone was slightly surprised when they learned that another guest had arrived. They looked outside and saw a family head bringing people into the hall. Haha, I didn't expect family head you to come too. Family head you, where did you come from? Seeing that several patriarchs had gathered in the Hong family's living room, Patriarch Yu was slightly taken aback. He stepped forward and said, "You're all here early. I just went to the city lord residence and didn't expect to see Patriarch Hong enter. I wanted to follow him in but I was stopped by the city guards. They told me not to enter without permission." As family head Yu spoke, he flicked his sleeves and snorted. What arrogance. He actually refused to let me in. Haha, so family head Yu went to the city lord mansion. No wonder, no wonder. One of them laughed out loud and shook his head. There's no hurry. We also want to see Patriarch Hong. Since we can't enter the city lord mansion, it's the same for us to wait here. Since we're all here today, I believe that Patriarch Hong will definitely answer our questions on account of so many of us. As they spoke, the Hong family elder drank tea at the side and didn't interrupt. He just listened quietly. The family head Yu's gaze swept across everyone and landed on the Hong family elder. Great elder, you're the great elder of the Hong family. I'm sure you know what's going on, right? The Hong family elder stopped drinking tea and looked at the elder. Family head Yu, you must be joking. Everything has been smooth recently. How would I know what's going on? Hearing this, Patriarch Yu frowned. Then let me ask you, who is that woman in red? The Hong family elder shook his head. I'm not sure. She just came to your mansion yesterday. Family head Yu shouted in a deep voice. Seeing his dark face and sharp gaze, the Hong family elder smiled and said, Family head Yu, have you forgotten that this is the Hong family? If you want to show off, I think it's better for you to return to your mansion. The other family heads originally pretended not to hear and drank their tea. However, after hearing what the great elder of the Hong family said, they put down their teacups. Family head Yu, since you're here, have a cup of tea first. We're also waiting. Even if we want to know, we're not in a hurry. That elder from the Hong clan didn't look at him again. Instead, he sat down and drank his tea as if he didn't hear them. Hearing their words, Patriarch Yu suppressed the anger in his heart, walked to the side and sat down, waiting for Patriarch Hong to return. At the same time, in the city lord's mansion, Patriarch Hong was in Fengjio's courtyard. Ghost Doctor, my father really woke up. As Patriarch Hong spoke, he gave her a deep bow. This time it's really all thanks to Ghost Doctor. Fengjio, who was eating breakfast, nodded and said, Wait for me for a while. I'll go with you later to take a look. When she wakes up, she still needs to recuperate. All right, Patriarch Hong replied and stood at the side waiting. About a quarter of an hour later, Fengjio finished eating. He wiped his mouth and stood up, saying, Tomorrow at the latest. Tomorrow, the elders of the city lord's mansion will invite all the patriarchs of the city to a gathering to promote you to the position. You should prepare well these 2 days. Yes, thank you, Ghost Doctor. He cupped his hands and thanked her. Although his tone was calm, there was unconcealable excitement and joy in his eyes. Chapter 28-27. When Patriarch Hong brought Fengjio back to the Hong residence, the moment they entered the residence, the steward quickly welcomed them and said, Patriarch, the patriarchs of the city have been waiting in the main hall for a long time. Hearing this, Patriarch Hong looked at Fengjio and said, Ghost Doctor, please go to my father's courtyard in the backyard first. I'll go take a look first and we'll be there later. Fengjiu nodded and followed the steward to old Master Hong's courtyard in the backyard. Patriarch Hong walked towards the main hall. Before he reached the hall, he heard voices coming from inside. He glanced at the few people sitting inside and his eyes moved slightly. He didn't expect the patriarchs of the various aristocratic families to be here. Seeing that the great elder was accompanying the guests in the hall, he immediately walked in and said with a smile, "What brings you all here?" Seeing him, everyone in the hall seemed to be moved. They all stood up and said with a smile, "Brother Hong, you've made us wait for a long time." I didn't know you were all here. Please don't blame me for being rude." Patriarch Hong laughed loudly and cupped his hands at them. "I think Brother Hong should know why we're here. Why don't you clear up our doubts?" One of the patriarchs said as his gaze fell on Patriarch Hong. Hearing this, Patriarch Hong smiled and said, "Are you all here for the city lord's mansion?" Patriarch Yu, who had a sullen expression, stood up and said directly, "That's right. We're here for the city lord's mansion." "Oh, that. I can't tell you all the details now. How about this? 2 days later, I don't need to tell you what you want to know. I think you'll know." As he spoke, he didn't go into the details of what they wanted to know. Hearing this, everyone's expression changed slightly. It seemed that he didn't intend to tell them the details. Seeing this, they didn't say anything else. After all, if he didn't want to, they wouldn't be able to get anything out of him. However, Patriarch Yu slammed the table and stood up. "Hong, are you looking down on us? We've been waiting here for half a day just because you said that?" Patriarch Yu, this matter is indeed not something that I can explain clearly. I still have matters to attend to now, so I'm afraid I won't be able to sit and chat with everyone. How about this, everyone can go back first. After a day or two, everything will be clear. At that time I'll treat all of you to a good meal." As he spoke, he did not look at their expressions. Instead, he looked at the first elder and said, "I'll have to trouble the first elder to send the family heads off for me." The great elder smiled and stood up. "Don't worry, Patriarch. Leave this matter to me." Thus, he smiled and gestured to the group, "Everyone please." Seeing this, the other families all stood up. "Since that's the case, let's go back first. Goodbye." As they spoke, they didn't stay for long. Instead, they cupped their hands and walked out. Patriarch Yu still wanted to say something, but when he saw Patriarch Hong's expression, he didn't say anything in the end. He flicked his sleeves and walked out. After they left the main hall of the Hong clan, Patriarch Hong also went to the backyard. After leaving the Hong residence, the family heads heard the words of the guards who were originally guarding outside and found out that Patriarch Hong had returned together with the red-clothed woman. Chapter 28. When he heard that the lady in red was also in the Hong residence, Patriarch Yu's face darkened. He snorted angrily and immediately walked back, intending to enter the Hong residence again to find out more about the lady in red. However, he did not expect that he would not be able to enter the Hong residence after he had just exited. Seeing that he was blocked outside, he snorted and flicked his sleeves. "I want to see who exactly this lady in red is." He did not leave but waited in the carriage parked outside the Hong residence, intending to wait here for the lady in red to come out and clarify things. When the others saw this, they laughed and said, "Patriarch Yu, why do you have to do this? We already said that we will know in 2 days, why wait here?" "That's right. Look, it's almost noon now and the sun is shining brightly. Why wait here?" The few of them laughed as they tried to persuade him. Who knew that he wouldn't listen and insisted on waiting here. Seeing this, the few of them looked at each other, shook their heads and left first. Hong residence. When she arrived at the Hong residence's backyard, Fengjiu entered Old Master Hong's room. When she entered the room, she saw Old Master Hong on the bed staring at the ceiling, deep in thought. No one knew what he was thinking about. The housekeeper who came with him called out softly, "Old Master, the ghost doctor is here." Hearing this, Old Master Hong came back to his senses. He looked at the lady in red standing by the bed and secretly sized her up. "This is the ghost doctor Fengjiu." Her red dress was dazzling, her face was beautiful, and she had the aura of a superior. No matter how one looked at it, she was definitely not an ordinary person. "Ghost doctor, forgive me for not being able to get up to greet you," he said apologetically. Fengjiu smiled and gestured with her hand. "It's okay, Old Master Hong can just lie down." She walked to the bedside and sat on the chair that the housekeeper had brought over. She said to Old Master Hong, "Let me take a look at Old Master Hong." Hearing this, Old Master Hong said, "Thank you." Then he reached out his hand. Fengjiu reached out and placed her hands on the old man's skinny wrists. After carefully checking his pulse, she asked about his physical condition. After a while, she withdrew her hands and said, "Let me do the acupuncture for the old master again. Later I'll prescribe some more medicine. She'll be fine after taking it for 2 days." Hearing this, old Master Hong showed a grateful expression. "This time, it's all thanks to the ghost doctor. If it weren't for her, I'm afraid my old bones would have to be like this." Fengjiu just smiled. He took out a silver needle from the space and performed acupuncture on him again to dredge the blocked blood flow. After a while, she put away the silver needles and went back to the table to write down the prescription. At the same time, the Hong family members also came into the room. "Ghost doctor, how is my father today?" he asked, looking at the ghost doctor who was writing a prescription on the table. "He's fine. This is the prescription. After picking the medicine, he'll be fine after drinking it for 2 days." Fengjiu said, handing over the prescription she had written. Seeing this, old Master Hong hurriedly took it with both hands. He said gratefully to Fengjiu, "Thank you, ghost doctor. I've asked the kitchen to prepare some good food and wine. Please, ghost doctor." Before he could finish, he was interrupted by Fengjiu. "No need. I still have to go back to the city lord's manor to arrange some things. I won't be staying here for long. At most, I'll be leaving in 1 or 2 days." Chapter 28-29. Fengjiu shook her head. "I still have matters to attend to, it's not suitable for me to stay for long." Seeing this, he did not urge her to stay but said, "In that case, ghost doctor, please wait for a moment, I'll be back soon." As he spoke, he did not wait for Fengjiu to say anything and quickly walked out. Not long after, he returned with a space ring in his hand. He said, "Ghost doctor, our Hong family has nothing else to thank you for. This is just a small token of our appreciation, please accept it." Fengjiu raised her eyebrows and glanced at the ring. Before she could speak, she heard old Master Hong's voice from the bed behind her. "Ghost doctor, this is just a small token of our appreciation, please don't refuse." Seeing this, Fengjiu nodded. "In that case, I'll accept it." She took the space ring and stored it in her space. Patriarch Hong sent Fengjiu out of the residence and watched as she mounted her white horse and left before returning home. City Lord Yu, who had parked the carriage in an inconspicuous corner, saw Patriarch Hong enter and the woman in red riding a white horse leave, and only then did he have the coachman follow. After walking for a while, Lao Bai said, "Master, someone is following us." He swung his tail, feeling that the person following them was tired of living. Let's go. Go to a deserted place." Fengjiu said carelessly, too lazy to look back. Hearing her words, Lao Bai walked towards a deserted alley. When the carriage following them saw them enter the alley, the coachman said, "Patriarch, the woman in red rode her horse into the alley. All right, stop the carriage here. The rest of you follow me in to take a look." Patriarch Yu said as he led a few guards into the alley. When he entered the alley, he saw the woman in red sitting on the white horse looking at him. Seeing this, he could not help but be startled. She knew that he was following her? "Who are you?" Patriarch Yu asked in a low voice, and his aura swept towards Fengjiu. Fengjiu, who was sitting on the horse, looked at him calmly. "I should be the one asking you that. I'm the head of the Yu family in the city." He was slightly surprised. Was this woman not afraid of his aura? Just how strong was she? "So it's the patriarch of the Yu family." Fengjiu nodded, his clear eyes falling on him, his eyebrows slightly raised as he asked, "As the head of a family, why are you involved in shady business?" "Patriarch Yu has followed me all the way and even followed me into the alley. What are you trying to do?" Hearing this, Patriarch Yu couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. As the head of a family, he had been discovered following someone. Now he was being criticized in such a manner. He felt anger boiling in his chest, and his aura fluctuated violently. You witch! How rude!" He angrily glared at the guards behind him and shouted, "What are you still standing there for? Teach her a lesson." Hearing this, Fengjiu smiled and said, "Patriarch Yu, you're sick. Your temper is fatal. You're the one who's sick." Patriarch Yu was so angry that the anger in his heart attacked his heart. He could only feel the anger in his body churning. He angrily pointed at Fengjiu and shouted, "Hurry up! Hurry up and, ah!" Before he could finish his words, his mouth crooked, and his words became muffled. Then, half of his body trembled and his body stiffened and he fell to the ground. Chapter 28-30. Patriarch? Patriarch? What's wrong with you?" The guards called out to him anxiously, but they only saw him staring at them with bloodshot eyes and mumbling, "Ah." Seeing this, Fengjiu smiled. "Why aren't you sending your patriarch back? It'll be troublesome if you're late." Hearing this, the guards couldn't care less about her and hurriedly sent their patriarch back to the residence. Lao Bai was stunned and asked, "Master, why is his mouth crooked? Did he talk too much?" Fengjiu patted his head and smiled. "Yes, he talks too much and has a bad temper. That's why it's good to cultivate one's heart and temperament. Only by cultivating one's heart and temperament can one's temperament be nurtured. Let's go. Let's go back to the city lord's residence." "All right," Lao Bai replied, and only then did he lead her towards the city lord's mansion. After entering the city lord's residence, she first returned to the courtyard and asked someone to find a few elders. They entered the courtyard and saw Fengjiu sitting at the stone table drinking tea. They walked forward and called out, "Ghost Doctor." She had been here for a few days and they knew that she was called Ghost Doctor. However, they still didn't know where she came from. "Has everything been arranged?" Fengjiu looked at them and asked. "Don't worry, Ghost Doctor. We've already sent the invitation to the big families. They'll come tomorrow," one of the elders said and then paused. "We've already arranged for the Hao family to leave." They discussed for a while in the courtyard and left after handing over the matters. Fengjiu also went into his room to cultivate until the next morning. Early in the morning, the few patriarchs in the city were invited and entered the residence one after another. On this day, the Hong family's old master and Patriarch Hong also arrived at the city lord's residence early. When everyone sat in the hall, they realized that the most bad-tempered patriarch you hadn't arrived yet. "Why isn't Patriarch you here yet? I thought he would be the first to arrive." "Yes. Why isn't he here yet?" "Yesterday, Patriarch you was still guarding outside the Hong residence and refused to leave. I wonder what happened after that. Could it be that you already knew what was going to happen here so you didn't plan to come?" The few of them laughed and chatted. Just as they were talking, they saw someone pushing a wheelchair over. When they saw the person in the wheelchair, they couldn't help but be stunned. Isn't this Patriarch you? Why are you in a wheelchair? Your mouth is crooked too. Why is half of your body shaking?" The few people in the hall looked on in astonishment. It had only been a day, how could it have become like this? After Patriarch you was pushed into the room, his gaze swept across the people inside, but he didn't see the woman in red. Thus, he opened his crooked mouth and asked in a muffled voice, Where is that woman in red?" "He's not here yet. Patriarch you, what's wrong with you?" one of the patriarchs asked in surprise. Patriarch you widened his eyes and seemed to want to say something, but his crooked mouth wasn't easy to speak. He just took a deep breath and didn't speak again. "My family's patriarch met that woman in red in the alley yesterday. He was so angered by her that his mouth was crooked and half of his body was paralyzed. Yesterday the doctor in the manor came to see him. After treatment he could barely speak," a guard said as he stood respectfully behind Patriarch Yu. Chapter 28:31. Not long after, Fengjiu, dressed in red, walked in with a few elders following behind him. As the crowd watched them enter, their gazes naturally fell on the beautiful woman in red. This was the woman in red? She was so beautiful. Just as they were thinking, they saw the woman in red sitting on the main seat in the hall. Everyone's eyes flickered when they saw where she sat. The elders stood on Fengjiu's left and right. They looked at everyone in the hall and said, "I've called everyone here today because I have something to announce." As the elder spoke, his gaze swept past everyone before landing on the Hong clan's father and son. He continued, "The city lord has abdicated his position. After our discussion, we have decided to elect a successor to the city lord position. This person is the Hong clan's clan leader." Everyone widened their eyes in shock when they heard this. They looked at the elder who spoke as well as Hong clan's father and son, who were unperturbed and unfazed. "Let Hong clan's patriarch succeed the city lord?" "That's right." The elder nodded. "In the future." Before he could finish, he was interrupted by one of them. "Who was the one who picked them out? I want to know. All the people from the various aristocratic families in the city are so outstanding. How can Hong clan's patriarch succeed the city lord? I hope there's an explanation that can convince us." The elder glanced at the patriarch and then he gazed at Fengjiu and continued, "This isn't a discussion, and it's a notification of our decision. I think that it shouldn't concern you at all who the members of our city governor's estate elects to become the city governor, right?" Hearing this, the patriarch frowned and said in a deep voice, "How is it unrelated? There are so many people who are more outstanding than him." "Why him? Also, Who is this woman in red? Could it be that you chose Hong Clan's patriarch to succeed the city lord because of this woman in red? His sharp gaze landed on Fengjiu. His gaze was as sharp as a knife and carried an inquisitive look. What ability did this woman have? How could she make them listen to her? Haha, that's where you're wrong. Does our city lord's mansion need your approval to choose someone? The great elder sneered. Like I said, I invited you all here today to inform you, not to listen to your opinions. Hearing these words, the family head only felt anger in his heart. Although he was not convinced if the city lord's mansion and the Hong family's forces were to join forces, they had no choice but to be wary. Compared to the family head, the other family heads were focused on the woman in red. Seeing her sitting quietly and drinking tea, they didn't pay attention to the family head's words. They couldn't help but secretly size her up. This woman's strength was unfathomable, and her bearing was extraordinary. Why would such a person suddenly intervene in the affairs of this city? He really couldn't understand. However, other than the people from the city lord's mansion and the Hong clan, no one else knew about this. Haha, we've been sitting here for so long, but we still don't know how to address this lady? One of the family heads asked as he looked at Fengjiu, who was drinking tea. Hearing this, the elder and family head Hong both glanced at Fengjiu. Fengjiu looked up at the family head and said with a smile, "Ghost Doctor. Ghost Doctor." Chapter 28:32. Patriarch, you spoke in agitation and nervousness. Because he spoke too quickly, his voice was not clear. He waved one hand and pointed at Fengjiu, wanting to say something, but in the end he was too anxious to say anything. The guard knew what the woman in red had said at that time, and what the patriarch had said after the treatment, so when he saw the patriarch shouting there, he said, "Ghost Doctor, our patriarch would like you to treat his illness. As long as you cure our patriarch's illness, our Yu family will definitely reward you handsomely." Yes, yes, yes. Patriarch Yu hurriedly nodded and looked at Fengjiu, looking at her with hope. When he went back, he remembered that she said he was sick. Today, when he saw that the Hong family's patriarch had woken up from his coma, how could he not know that this woman in red was a doctor? Now he only hoped that she could cure his illness and let him recover to his original state. When the others heard this, their hearts couldn't help but tremble. Did something happen to Patriarch Yu yesterday that they didn't know about? Yesterday, he seemed to have been waiting for this woman in red at the Hong family. Did something happen later that they didn't know about? This won't be easy. Fengjiu said carelessly, glancing at him and saying with a faint smile, "Patriarch Yu's illness is caused by the heat of the heart attacking his heart, causing his blood vessels to be blocked. To put it bluntly, it's a mild stroke. If this isn't treated well, his mouth will always be crooked like this, half of his body will be weak, and his movements will be hindered." Patriarch Yu panicked when he heard this. He crooked his mouth and called out vaguely, "Ghost Doctor. Alright, you guys can chat. I'll return to the courtyard first." Fengjiu said, leaving the matter to them to discuss among themselves. Patriarch Yu panicked when he saw Fengjiu leave just like that. Seeing that his pleading was useless, he couldn't help but look at Patriarch Hong. Hong. He pushed his wheelchair forward with one hand, hoping that Patriarch Hong could help him. Seeing this, Patriarch Hong glanced at his father. Finally he said, "I can help you put in a good word, but whether the ghost doctor is willing to help, we can't guarantee that." Thank you. Patriarch Yu heaved a sigh of relief. Seeing this scene, the eyes of several people in the hall flashed slightly. After sitting for a while, they got up and said their goodbyes. The other patriarchs left first while Patriarch Yu stayed behind. Patriarch Hong and his son went to Fengjiu's courtyard. When the two of them arrived at the courtyard, they saw her sitting there. The father and son looked at each other and walked in. "Ghost Doctor." "Yes." Fengjiu was flipping through a book in his hand. He only responded faintly and did not look at them. "Ghost Doctor, I wonder if you can take a look at Patriarch Yu? If he continues to be like this in the future, I'm afraid that the Yu family will be in chaos." Fengjiu smiled. He put down the book in his hand and looked at the two of them. "Let him come over." Hearing this, the Hong family's father and son were slightly surprised, but soon understood. The ghost doctor wanted family head Yu to owe their Hong family a favor. Thinking of this, the two of them couldn't help but feel grateful. They bowed deeply to her. "Thank you, ghost doctor." They didn't expect that she would think of such leeway for them. As it turned out, she had already agreed to treat Patriarch Yu long ago. She didn't agree on the spot, but gave this favor to them so that they would have the support of the Yu family in the future. Chapter 28:33. With Fengjiu's permission, they brought Patriarch Yu over and watched her treat him in the courtyard. In the evening, when Patriarch Yu was sent back, his mouth was no longer crooked, but he still couldn't control half of his body. He was already very grateful because he heard the ghost doctor say that he would recover after half a month of recuperation. How could he not be excited by such a result? After he returned to the residence, he sent someone to deliver gifts of thanks. Fengjiu accepted them without any hesitation. That day, the Hong family arranged for an auspicious day to stay in the city lord's residence. The city lord's residence also released the news that the city lord had changed hands and was now Patriarch Yu of the Hong family. When this news was released, everyone in the city couldn't help but cheer. It could only be said that the Hong family had won the hearts of the people in the city, and it was also expected that they would become the city lord. The next day, when the Hong family came to Fengjiu's courtyard again, they found that the white horse and her had disappeared. At the same time, in the Peach Blossom Cove of the former Phoenix dynasty, a red figure strolled through the peach blossom forest like a fairy that had fallen into the mortal world. A gentle breeze brushed past her face, causing peach blossoms to fall. Her red dress gently swayed as she walked, blooming into beautiful flowers. They were like ripples on water, spreading out in circles. It was truly beautiful. She hadn't returned since she left. Now that she looked at this place again, she felt that nothing had changed. She sighed in her heart and felt a mix of emotions. Just as she was walking through the peach blossom forest, she faintly heard a familiar voice. This place is Xiao Jio's Peach Blossom Cove. She used to stay here often. It's rare for you to come back, so take a good look. Guan Xilin's voice sounded in the peach blossom forest. When she heard this voice, Fengjiu was slightly surprised, then smiled. So it was her brother? Did he bring Feng Yi and the others here to play? As she thought this, she restrained her aura and followed the voice. When she came to a peach blossom forest, she saw that they were indeed there. She saw her brother standing under a tree, while Feng Yi and Zhao Yang were sitting on a peach tree swinging their legs. She smiled and hid her figure well. She picked a peach blossom and flew it towards Feng Yi. Guan Xilin under the tree saw this and immediately shouted, "Who's there?" At the same time, he reached out his hand to block the peach blossom. Seeing this, the smile on Fengjiu's face deepened. She shot a few more peach blossoms and this time not only attacked Feng Yi and Zhao Yang, but also Guan Xilin. Guan Xilin blocked some of the peach blossoms. Seeing that the peach blossoms were not fierce and did not have any murderous intent, he was puzzled. He took a step back and saw that the peach blossoms were only attacking Feng Yi and the young man. It was more like the peach blossoms were toying with them than attacking them. Was it little 9? Xiao Jio's here? This girl's not here but hiding in the dark to tease us. He shook his head inwardly. Fengjiu leaned out and waved at him. At this time, Feng Yi and Zhao Yang shouted, "Who dares to sneak up on us?" The two jumped down from the peach tree and dodged until the peach blossoms stopped flying. Then they saw the red figure coming out from behind the peach tree. Chapter 28:34. Fengjiu felt goosebumps rise on his arms when he heard the words little niece. It was such a loss to be called little niece by a kid so much younger than him. Sister Feng. Zhao Yang was also very happy to see her. He jogged to her side and greeted her. Fengjiu reached out and patted his head. Yang, you've trained well. Continue to work hard." Yes. Zhao Yang smiled happily and nodded in response. "Xiaojio, when did you arrive? Are you alone? Didn't Mose and the others come?" Guan Xilin asked. "No, I didn't come with them," Fengjiu said. His heart skipped a beat when he heard this. He asked, "But what happened after we left? Did you go up the Immortal Ascension stairs?" "Yes, I'll tell you more about it later. Right now it's hard to explain in a few words." She smiled. "I just arrived here. When I heard your voices, I knew you were here." "Yes. I wanted to bring them here to take a look and send them back in a few days," Guan Xilin said, then added, "Grandpa and the others were very happy to see Feng Yi and Zhao Yang come back." Fengjiu nodded when he heard this. "It's good that you've met them. Xiaojio, let's go home together. If my parents know that you're back, they'll be very happy. Oh, and my brother and sister-in-law too." He winked and said with a smile, "Little brat." Fengjiu knocked his head lightly. "I'm your little uncle." Feng Yi protested. "Yes, little uncle. Let's go. Let's go home." She reached out and pinched his pink cheeks. She held his hand and looked at Guan Xilin. "Brother, where's Yi Jing?" "She went home," Guan Xilin said. Fengjiu nodded. "It's good to go back. At least it's safer." But when do you plan to marry her? This? He smiled, seemingly a little embarrassed. I was thinking of asking my adoptive parents to arrange it for me, but I don't seem to have the time recently. Then let's find a time to do it. Don't let Yi Jing wait too long, she said with a smile. Yes, I know. He nodded. This was also the reason why he came back this time. They left Peach Blossom Cove and sat in a carriage that had stopped at the foot of the mountain. The group then headed towards the Feng Manor. When the carriage stopped in front of the mansion's gate, Fengjiu alighted from the carriage. The gatekeeper couldn't help but stare blankly and immediately dashed inside to report. Eldest Miss is back. Young Miss is back. When the people in the residence heard this, they couldn't help but be surprised. After hearing the news, they quickly reported it to the various courtyards. Oh, little Feng? You're saying that little Feng is back? When Feng Sanyuan heard this news, he couldn't help but be delighted. Quickly, let's go take a look. Su Shi also stood up and walked forward with him. In another courtyard, after Feng Xiao heard the news, he was a little incredulous. Xiao Jiao is back. Shengguan Wanru, who was embroidering to pass the time, couldn't help but stab herself with the needle in her hand. She stood up in surprise. Xiao Jiao? Xiao Jiao is really back? Madam, let's quickly go take a look. This girl hasn't been back for a long time. I don't know how she is now. As Feng Xiao spoke, he led her outside. Seeing that she was walking faster than him, Feng Xiao couldn't help but smile. Madam, don't worry. You'll see her. Chapter 28:35. Xiao Jiao. Little Feng. Voices of pleasant surprise rang out in unison from the mouths of several people. Feng Jiao only saw a figure flash in front of her. Her mother came to her side and hugged her. It's good that you're back, it's good that you're back. Shengguan Wanru cried tears of joy. Seeing that her daughter was back, her heart that had been worried about her finally relaxed. Mother, Feng Jiao called out, taking a step back and coming out of her arms. I came back to see you. Good, good, good. Feng Xiao nodded and patted her shoulder. Father, Feng Jiao called out sweetly, then looked at the two people at the side. Grandfather, grandmother. She called out. Looking at their faces, she smiled. Grandfather, you're almost younger than my father. Your complexion is also good. That's also because of the pills you left behind, Feng Sanyuan said with a smile. All right, don't just stand here. Let's go inside and sit. He gestured for everyone to enter the hall. Feng Jiao followed them in. After sitting down, Feng Sanyuan asked, Why are you the only one back? Where are the others? Actually, it's like this. I came from overseas using the Aurora transmission scroll. Mose and the others should be on their way. Overseas? Why did you go overseas? After I came back from Penglai Immortal Island, I was watched again. Those people used a spatial array to bring me overseas. Later I escaped and came back first. She spoke in a few words, but their hearts were slightly raised. The danger was something they could not estimate. Xiao Jiao, why don't you come back home? Don't go out again. You're outside alone. We're all worried about you, Feng Xiao said with a frown. Hearing this, Feng Jiao smiled slightly. Actually, I came back this time because I have something to tell you. She looked at them and said, Mose and I have already discussed it. We plan to go to the Celestial Ascension Stairs and cultivate behind the Profound Light Gate. We don't know how long it will take for us to return, so we decided to come back and take a look first. We're here to inform you. Hearing this, everyone was slightly surprised and asked worriedly, Is that place dangerous? Half and half. Feng Jiao said. Then how many people do you plan to bring? Why do you have to take the risk in such a dangerous place? Feng Xiao looked at her and was worried. I only plan to bring 8 people over. That's right, I picked up a child some time ago. I plan to raise the child over there. Actually, Mose and I are already considered strong over here, but there are many people over there who are stronger than us. We all want to increase our own strength. Also, I can't be with you. She smiled slightly. If I were to be with you, the danger you'll face will increase by dozens. I have many enemies, but their target is only me. Now that you're living here, it can be considered peaceful. I don't want to break the peace here. But you? Feng Sanyuan looked at her hesitantly. Chapter 28:36. Seeing this, Guanxili nodded. I know, I still need to improve my strength. Oh right, Dad, Mom, find a time to help brother get married. She looked at her parents sitting at the side and said, Okay, we'll arrange this. They nodded and asked with a smile, What about your marriage with Mose? When do you plan to get married? Hearing this, Fengjiu smiled and said, "We're not in a hurry, we'll take it slow." They chatted in the hall for a while, then let Fengjiu go back to rest first. Returning to the courtyard, she looked at the place that hadn't changed and smiled. "It feels like I haven't been back for a long time, but this place is still the same. The decorations haven't been touched, it's still the same style as before. There's someone cleaning the courtyard every day, you can move in at any time." Feng Xiao walked with his hands behind his back and said, "It's rare for you to come back, you should stay for a few more days this time." "Okay." Fengjiu replied and went into the room to look around before coming out again. "Dad, are you all doing well here?" Don't worry about us, we're fine here." He smiled. "We don't have a country here now, so we're free in all aspects. Other countries don't dare to be presumptuous towards us here, so we've always lived in peace. Moreover, although there's no country here, the people around here, so no one from other places dares to have any ideas about us here." "That's good." She nodded in relief. "Don't you plan to let everyone know that you're back this time?" he asked. "Yes, don't spread the news of my return so that those people don't come looking for trouble," Fengjiu said. "I understand, I'll make the arrangements." As he spoke, he gestured for her to sit down and smiled. "Your mother went to the kitchen to make some food for you, you can sit for a while and rest after you eat." "Okay," she replied with a smile as she said, "I'll let Lao Bai and the others out. It's been a long time since you've seen them." With a flick of her sleeve, Lao Bai and the others were released, and they walked around the courtyard happily. "Another white tiger cub?" Feng Xiao looked at the white tiger cub that was rubbing against her daughter's feet and was a little surprised. "Yes, I picked it up." She smiled. "There's still a silver wolf that I haven't contracted yet. He should have followed Mo's here." "That's good. You have these contracted beasts by your side so you don't have to worry about having fewer people in battle." He laughed heartily and reached out to pat little white tiger's head. Seeing that it was its master's father, the little white tiger obediently lowered its head and closed its eyes comfortably, allowing him to stroke it. Not long after, Shangguan Wanru came in with something. "Xiaojiu, I made some food for you. Try it." She walked forward with a smile, put down the tray and took out the bowl on the tray and placed it in front of Fengjiu. Fengjiu opened the lid and saw that it was a bowl of hot noodles with many ingredients. Smelling the fragrance, she couldn't help but smile happily. "Thank you, Nyang Qin. Eat it while it's hot." Shangguan Wanru sat down beside her and handed her a pair of chopsticks, looking gently at the satisfied expression on her face. This child is just a bowl of noodles, but she's so happy. Thinking that no one would make such a simple thing for her outside, she couldn't help but feel sour. Chapter 28:37. "Mother, you're so good at cooking," Fengjiu said as he ate the noodles. He didn't know if it was because he was hungry or something else, but the noodles tasted delicious. Shangguan Wanru's eyes reddened when she heard this. "Silly child, you like it? I'll cook for you every day." "Okay," she replied with a smile and continued eating. She only put down her chopsticks when she finished the big bowl of noodles. "Phew. I'm so full," she said as she touched her stomach. Seeing this, Feng Xiao and Shangguan Wanru couldn't help but shake their heads and smile. At this moment, a few contracted beasts also gathered around. "Master, we're hungry too," Lao Bai said as he wagged his tail. "How about this? Xiaojiu, you rest well. I'll bring them to the front," Feng Xiao said as he stood up with a smile. Shangguan Wanru also stood up and put the bowl back on the tray. "Rest well. You can relax at home and don't have to worry about danger." "Okay, I know." She nodded and stood up to send them out before returning to the courtyard. Walking in the courtyard, she touched her stomach. She didn't go back to her room to rest but went to the back of the mountain instead. She heard them say that the fire phoenix was cultivating in the cave at the back of the mountain and didn't know that she was back yet. Now that she was full, she wanted to take a look at it. When she came to the cave at the back of the mountain and walked past the array, she smiled when she saw the array with the boundary. It seemed that even if she wasn't by its side, it was still cultivating consciously. The fire phoenix, who was cultivating in the cave, felt a familiar aura. It was stunned and opened its eyes. It immediately restrained its aura and flapped its wings to fly out of the cave. When it saw the dazzling red figure about to turn and leave, it couldn't help but call out excitedly, "Master." Then it flew towards Fengjiu. Fengjiu heard the sound and turned around to see the fire phoenix flapping its wings and flying towards her. She smiled and reached out to hug it. "I saw that you were cultivating, so I didn't want to disturb you." Master, you've finally come," the fire phoenix said excitedly. Suddenly it heard a clucking sound. It turned around and saw a green-furred bird running towards it on the grass, flapping its wings and clucking. Master! 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 Fengjiu was slightly surprised. Looking at Green Hair who was running towards them, he couldn't help but be startled. Ah! It's a green-feathered chicken. She had almost forgotten that there was such a green-feathered chicken. When the fire phoenix heard Green Hair's voice, it immediately came out of Fengjiu's arms. With a flap of its wings, a gust of wind blew Green Hair away. Ah! Master! Seeing this, Fengjiu couldn't help but smile. Alright, stop fooling around. Since we're all out, I'll bring you to the front. Lao Bai and the others are all in the residence. She waved her hand and led the fire phoenix and Green Hair into the residence to meet with Lao Bai and the others. However, Green Hair kept clinging to her side and didn't go far. Instead, wherever she went, it clucked behind her and called for its master. Feng Jiu let the other contracted beasts gather while she returned to the courtyard to take a bath and lay down to rest. She didn't wake up until the next day. At the same time, she didn't know that Mose had already entered the territory of the Phoenix dynasty with the child and Lung Shuang and the others. They were on a flying ship and were heading towards the city. Chapter 28:38. Had she already escaped danger and returned home? Thinking of this, he looked ahead worriedly. His heart was nervous, worried that he wouldn't see her there. Lung Shuang, Lung Hua and the others sat on the side looking at Mose who was carrying the child looking ahead. The siblings looked at each other, then Lung Hua stepped forward and said, "Yama Lord, we should arrive in an hour. Should we enter the city directly? Or should we park the spaceship outside the city?" "Let's enter the city directly," he said in a deep voice. "Okay." Lung Hua responded and returned to where they were. Bai Qingqing looked in front of her and was slightly startled. Was this the place where her master grew up? She never thought that she would one day come to the place where master grew up. She never thought that master would pick her out of so many outstanding and loyal subordinates and bring her to another world. When she heard the news, she was shocked and touched. At the same time, she secretly made up her mind that in this life, no matter how great her achievements were in the future, master would always be her master. Oh. The little guy in Moses' arms waved his little hands and his delicate pink little face broke into a giggle. The child's innocent face and laughter made Xinyuan Moses' tense heart gradually relax. He teased the child in his arms and said, "I'll take you to see your mother. Your mother is waiting for us at home." The little thing waved his hands and laughed excitedly, saliva flowing out of his mouth. Seeing this, Moses' lips curled up and he said to Lung Shuang, "Carry down and feed him." "Yes." Lung Shuang stepped forward and took the child. He stood up and walked to the front of the spaceship with his hands behind his back. He watched the white clouds pass by and a bustling scene appeared before his eyes. At this moment, Fengjiu was washing up and getting up. After breakfast, she went to the alchemy room to refine pills. The contract beasts were all wandering around the residence. Even the fire phoenix was flying around happily. Because its master had returned. Once its master returned, it didn't want to return to the cave to cultivate. The mansion was filled with joy because everyone had gathered. Old Master Feng and the others were discussing the betrothal gifts for Guan Shilin's marriage proposal. Suddenly, a loud noise that hadn't been heard in a long time resounded in the mansion. Bang! When they heard this voice, everyone in the mansion was stunned. What's going on? Could it be that someone had attacked their residence? When they thought of this, they quickly rushed towards the source of the sound. When they arrived at the alchemy courtyard, their worried hearts finally relaxed. So it's Xiao Jiu who's refining pills. This girl can scare people to death just by refining pills. Haha, I haven't heard the sound of a furnace exploding for a long time. I'm really not used to it. Feng Xiao laughed heartily. He looked at the figure who was coughing as he walked out of the alchemy room. Then he said to the people behind him, "Disperse, disperse. Don't disturb her refining." Feng Xiao said as he walked back. Thus, after a while, the people who had followed the sound dispersed. Cough, cough. Fengjiu covered her mouth and nose as she coughed lightly. She used her sleeves to disperse the smoke in the air. She looked at the destroyed furnace and thought for a moment. Then she took out the furnace that she usually refined from her space. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.